Here we are. So good afternoon. I will say a few words about Professor Jim Ridolfo. He is a professor of writing, rhetoric, and digital studies at the University of Kentucky. He has a PhD in rhetoric and writing from Michigan State University. His work focuses on the intersection of rhetorical theory and digital technology. He wrote 4 books. His first from 2012 on theory and pedagogy of multimodal public rhetoric. His second book is on rhetoric and the digital humanities, together with Davidson, was published in 2015. His third big book, Digital Samaritan, Rhetorical Delivery and Engagement in the Digital Humanities. It was published also in 2015. And his fourth book, Ops, Rhetoric and Information Warfare, was published in 2019 together with co-author Davidson. He also published in various journals. He is a recipient of awards like 2012 Middle East and North Africa Regional Research Fulbright for the West Bank and Israel. And another one in 2014, Richard Ullman Award for Outstanding Article in College English, and other as well. Last but not least, Jim is a friend. I first met his wife, Professor Jan Feinerheimer from University of Kentucky. She's an oral history expert. But since they are coming to Israel and visit Israel quite often, the families became friends. And I'm so glad you're here, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours, Jim.
Barry, thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you all for hosting me in this difficult time and sending my thoughts with you all from Kentucky, and hope that your loved ones continue to be safe. I want to start off by talking about geocoding in general, in terms of research and then teaching, and then we'll have a hands-on demonstration. So I'm going to start the presentation right now. Can you all see that okay? I do screen sharing.
Not you.
1 sec.
Here we go.
There we go. Let's start presentation. Just had it and I lost it. Slideshow. Play from start. Y'all see that? Yeah. So I'm from University of Kentucky. I don't know if you all know where that is. Usually half the folks do, half the folks don't. But we are below Ohio, and we are to the west of Virginia, and to the south of us is Tennessee. To just give you kind of a geocoded idea of where I'm from. So let's start off with geocoding and research. This is the idea of this workshop is that hopefully you get some ideas for your research and pedagogy for how you can use geocoded maps in different ways. So I'm going to walk you through a couple different case examples of ways that this has been impactful for me in my work, and then talk about teaching, and then we'll get the demonstration. So first I want to start off with just a quotation from a scholar, Derek Mueller. And this is from a book, Network Sense, Methods for Visualizing a Discipline, that's open source and open access through the WAC clearinghouse, the link below. And it's a really great book for thinking about visualizing lots of data. So if you ever read like Ever-Tufty, for example, and the visual display of quantitative information, this is a really good book for thinking more particularly about how to visualize data in disciplines. With relevance to the social sciences and the humanities. But Derek makes a really good point that maps are dynamic objects, and all the more rhetorically and theoretically responsible when we recognize the situations in which they're produced, the evolving nature of the data encoded in them, and the delicate ideological balance between historical production and future-oriented speculation. So a lot of what I'm going to show you today is sort of boutique data that I collect over the course of many, many years in spreadsheets and comma-separated variables. And then I geocode it. And the platform that I geocode it in, I'm kind of agnostic about. It's whatever works best. The most important thing really is the data that I'm kind of keeping on a regular basis and curating. So I just want to put that out there, that I'm not like attached to any particular platform in terms of geocoding, but I'm attached to sort of the methodology around collecting data and curating it, which we all do as scholars. This is just the book that you should definitely check out if you get a chance to read, and it's free. So the first example I want to talk about is a website that I run called repmap.org. And this was a site that began pretty much in 2012. And the idea behind it was to visualize the locations of all the different doctoral programs in rhetoric and writing studies in North America. So that includes the United States and Canada. At the time, there was basically just a list of programs that was published, as a long form list. And this is one of those examples that seemed to be kind of like perfect for turning into a map to help people think about the locations of things in relationship to other cities and people they know and stuff like that. So it was to make a map that prospective PhD students in particular could look at and go, oh, okay, like that's near this city. There's a cluster of programs over here in this area. So I started to maintain this map for starting in 2012. And because the map had such circulation, people would send me updates to it on a regular basis and stuff like that. So from 2012, the data on the map gradually grew. Now it's to 92 programs today, and 94 actually today. And this is something where the map itself, I'm also chair of the doctoral consortium rhetoric and composition. The map itself becomes something that's circulated on other websites too, that can be embedded, and people go and check it out and then send me updates for it and stuff like that. So all of this is kept on the back end as a CSV file or a Google spreadsheets or an Excel sheet. The second thing that I started to do after that was geocode job listings in our field. So Vera mentioned that my wife and I are both academics, and we both did a job search together for several years in a row, as I'm sure many of you all have done. Although I know Israel is a bit smaller, but in the United States and in Canada, getting jobs in the same location approximately is pretty tough. So one of the things that we started to do was geocode all of the jobs, so we could get a sense of the geographic proximity between positions and stuff like that. So starting in 2012, I started to geocode all those jobs that are available at MLA, the Modern Language Association. And if you go to repmap.org, you can go and see all the past maps that I created there. And around 2014, I opened it up to general submissions for jobs. So the idea there was that MLA charged $500 to publish a print job listing in their circulation in their periodical they circulated to all the different programs that subscribe to them. And RepMap, I only asked for a donation to a field fund to list a job. So approximately 25% of listings now on RepMap are user generated listings that are submitted directly to RepMap, and they're not posted to MLA. But over time, this data sort of became more and more valuable to sort of get a larger picture of how the job market's changing. So now we have over 10 years of data that I've collected that people do research on and make applications that are based on that data. But the general format's pretty simple. So you'll see in the geocode column right here that I put a circle around, that really is the main point of data. So as long as you have something geocodable, whether it's a city in a state or a city in a country or a zip code or longitude, latitude coordinates, you'll be able to then geocode all the rest of the data that you see there. So the nice thing about batch geocoding is it takes one column as the primary column of data, and then everything else around that becomes geocoded with that column in mind. So it's very quick and simple to do. So this is an example of some of the maps that were created there. This is 2012 to 13. This is the current year that I'm currently working on, 2023 to 2024. And these are the public data sheets that go along with those maps. So along with the publication of the geocoded maps are openly available public Google spreadsheets where people can download those sheets and do things with the data, do research on the data. And indeed, some people have done some really cool projects with it. Over time, I've tried to keep the data really simple. So going back with the idea of what's possible to curate, One thing that I learned from this project in particular was less is more. So I can't curate 10 or 15 columns of data every week, but I can curate 6 or 7. And so the one piece of data that I added to the sheet the last couple of years was coding the data for tenure track or non-tenure track jobs as something that I think was useful for people to know about and keep track on. And this also then leads to cumulative job market data, like I talked about. So I can't fit the entire spreadsheet in here, but I have the data from 2012 to 2023 with the biweekly data all the way up to January 1st for the number of job listings and the percentage of job listings that are posted before or after the first of the year, which has been really helpful for job candidates that are going on the market to strategize how they send out applications, how they think about their job search. So the maps on the one hand are really useful for browsing. The data on the back end is also really useful for aggregating. This is an example of sort of some of the apps that can be built based on the open data. So Chris Lindgren, he's a data visualization scientist at Virginia Tech University. He built a D3 app that's based off of the RepMap job market data sheets. It's not currently working. It needs to get updated, but it worked for many, many years. And it provided a real-time visualization of some different aggregate data ways of looking at the data from the different job market years and comparing it. Second example I want to talk about is more particular to my research. As Vered mentioned, I had a Middle East and North Africa regional research Fulbright. I worked with the Shomronim for many years on digitization projects of their manuscripts and stuff like that. And I did a book about that project that came out in 2015 from University of Michigan Press. And I had a couple challenges in that project, one of which was to take some data that had previously been produced and make it more readable to external audiences and make it into maps. So that was one example where geocoding of data became really useful for me. This is data that was originally from Benjamin Sadaka's publication that came out in an edited collection, Samaritans Past and Present by Menachem Moore and Frederick Rader. And this was a chapter that he made listing Samaritan communities that have previously existed in different places. So all the dots that you see, with the exception of Holon and Har Bracha, are previously populated Samaritan communities. As far to the west as Alexandria, and then as far to the east as Damascus. This was in a chapter form, but I felt that it wasn't that impactful. So I wanted to be available in a map form so people could browse that and get a sense of just how extensive the Samaritan diaspora was from just kind of a visual look. And so the process of doing that was basically taking the data and adding geocodes to all of the data, the columns and stuff like that. So when you go and click on any one of these, you can see the actual data. So you get the description, for example, for Cairo, of all the different Samaritan family names that were in the city at that time, based on Sadaka's account. I did the same with Jean-Pierre Rothschild's work, and this was published in 1989 on Samaritan manuscripts. And what I wanted to convey here was Rothschild had this list of Samaritan collections all throughout the world. All these different libraries, like for example, Hebrew Union College at Cincinnati that I worked with for many years, has a very large collection of Samaritan manuscripts, and Michigan State has a very large collection. And these are all outside of Eretz Israel. They're outside of the reach of the Samaritan community. So I wanted to convey a sense of what that diaspora looks like spatially. So I geocoded all this data here. And you can go and browse the map on SamaritanRepository.org, maps/manuscripts, if you want to check that out. But this, to me, was a much more effective way of conveying that data than the traditional sort of like list or finding aid style of that. And this is just an example. If you go and click on Hebrew Union College right here, you can see the description of the collection and a citation of where that comes from. This was the last example that I'll talk about from research before we move on a little bit. This was a project I worked on in 2021 with Bill Hart Davidson, and the problem that we realized was this was the middle of the pandemic, the height of when most universities were online in the United States, December 2020, and we noticed, we've been tracking this for a long time, that increasingly essay mills, paper mills, I don't know how common they are in Israel, but these are companies that will specifically try to write papers for students for money. Does that sound familiar? In North America, in Europe, in Australia, these are very large businesses, and there's hundreds of domain names associated with these paper mills and essay mills and stuff like that. And in the middle of the pandemic, they realized that a number of them realized that when a lot of students were online and unable to go to university services, support services, like the Writing Center, for example, that most campuses in the United States have, they did SQL injections of university websites at scale. So basically, they were running large scripts looking for vulnerabilities on WordPress sites and doing injections on those sites. And the injections would basically inject on the .edu content that would redirect students from the university website to the paper mill. So the students would go, for example, in Google Writing Center help writing support, and they would get their university website, and the site would be compromised and redirect them to a paper mill. And so we did, with Chris Lindgren, a very large scan of all of the .edu space in North America. And we found hundreds of compromised websites, and basically then went and geocoded those websites. So this is what that looked like in the summer. And these are all websites that have a .edu TLD, top level domain. We ended up doing the version of this project with Canada, with academics there, and then we worked with the Australian government in 2021 on the Australian space. In particular, the Australians they have a centralized higher education system, and they were really concerned about the possibility of students being compromised, especially military academy students and stuff like that. If they gave their information to paper mills, they'd be blackmailed. And they're worried about sort of the security element of that. So we did scans for them too. This was a Canadian scan. It was mostly centered in Ontario. Sorry. Is there a question? Oh, sorry. And this was the Australian space. And what I'll note is that these are really just 4 universities, 5 universities. And this is a heat map right here. So you can do that too with the maps that you work on. In teaching, I've used geocoding a lot. I teach a class, it's a Word 205 class here. It's in our major, and I've taught it at the University of Cincinnati as well, where it asks students to respond to disaster preparation scenarios. It could be flood, fire, natural disaster, and prepare things like supplies, civil defense plans, and create posters for municipal presentations. So the local council, for example, and that asks students to go and map community resources. That could be where there's water in the community, where there's shelter, where there's food. And this is an example of one of those posters for that project from Cincinnati. And it maps basically neighborhood supplies like safe zones, medical supplies, transportation, defense, stuff like that. And this is another example of that that maps supplies across the city of Cincinnati. And this one in particular, this one uses Google Maps, which I'm fine with in terms of using it for geocoding. It's just you have to use an API to batch geocode. And part of what the benefit for me of batch geocoding is just time. It saves a great deal of time. But if you want to go and use maps.google without the API, you can individually add coordinates, which is also really useful. One of the things too that I have them use is like resources like data.gov, which for the United States, there might be an equivalent in Israel, I'm not sure, but this is just a giant clearinghouse of open source data from cities, municipalities, governments. And you can find a lot of different geocoded data on there, geocodable data on there. In the directory that I give you all as an example for the hands-on demonstration that we're going to do in a little bit, one of the pieces of data that's in there is federal firearms licenses that the government licenses for individuals to sell guns. So in Kentucky, we have a lot of those, and usually people don't know where they are. They're people's homes. They're not businesses with storefronts that say like guns for sale. They're just somebody that has a license to sell lots of guns. And so one of the things that students will do is geocode that open source data to get a better picture or sense of what their city looks like in terms of like where guns are being sold, and how many people are selling them and what neighborhoods have the most kind of presence of people selling guns and stuff like that. And that feeds into a lot of research projects. We have a lot of projects in first year writing in the United States on gun control debates, as I'm sure you imagine. So that's one example that we can provide some inquiry-driven data to help students with those debates in ways that are more constructive and productive. This is a project that I'm sure you all are familiar with, but it's one that I find really useful, especially with students. The HaMaPa projects. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with this, but it's a really cool project that aims to bring modern tools of quantitative and geographic analysis to rabbinic literature. So they're mapping all kinds of really awesome stuff from rabbinic literature and making it more visual and engaging. And this is Ellie Fisher and Moshe Shor's project. Thought I mentioned that. And this is an example of one of their Vilna Gaon's reputation spreading mapping project that they did. They have a really cool blog with maps that you can check out. So this is the hands-on demonstration part, and hopefully this will go well. We'll see. So I made a directory of geocodable data. There's just 3 spreadsheets that are available. And if you go to this website, this is my website, rid.olfo.org/doc/geocode. And I'll put that in the chat too as a link. And then you go to batchgeo.com. And again, like I'm not beholden to BatchGeo, but I have subscribed to it now for, gosh, I want to say 13 years, for about 60 shekel a month, more or less, in terms of the cost of it. And then you copy the data into the main website's window here. And then I'll show you how to go and align the data, the geocode with the data and create a map. So let me just add that to the chat. Did we have any questions right now before we go on to the demonstration?
Yes, I have question.
Yeah.
How it's different from other tools like Power BI or Google Locker that they have also maps?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the tool itself. I'm agnostic about in terms of like, for example, you could do geocoding with an LLM. That to me isn't really what matters. It's really the spreadsheet and the keeping of the data on the back end, and then being able to do that transformation of the data.
Okay.
So like most of the data that is released open source, at least in terms of the United States, is released in CSVs or Excel sheets. And so it's getting students to do the transformation with that, or curating that data on your own side over time. That matters to me, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yes.
So like,
yes.
yeah. So for some platforms, for example, you'll get different mapping backgrounds. Like for example, I use Gaia as a mapping platform when I want to use longitude and latitude, and I create maps with that. I create a lot of like navigation files with that, especially for like trips and stuff, like backpacking trips, or if I'm trying to, for example, find trails, I'll use that. And it has better API for background and stuff like that. But in terms of just like taking a lot of data and really quickly batch geocoding it, I find that it's useful to use something like Batch Geo.
And for this tool, you need the coordination.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so there are a few questions on the chat, but one that I agree with, we get an error using the first link.
It's not working?
No, the first link in your website is not working.
One sec. That's weird.
Hmm. You can open it?
It's going to stop screen sharing for a second and just check the settings, if that's okay. Sorry, Barry, one sec. So the question about open source and QGIS, yeah, you could totally use that. I haven't used it that much. I've used Batch Geo now for 12 years. I've used QGIS a little bit, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with using it. Oh, I'm sorry, it's geodata. Sorry about that. That's the correct link. All right, now I'll enable screen sharing again.
Yes. Which file should we open? The Excel or?
You can choose either of the three. So of the three files, I'll show you right now.
It's forbidden. We have no access permission.
Thought I had it fixed. I'll fix that.
But if I think you can upload them on the chat, the three of them.
I can fix that with one command. One sec.
Okay.
It works now. You're all set.
Yeah.
So there's three files there. So the first one is the Australian web data. The second one is the Kentucky federal firearms license data from January 2023. And the third one is rhetoric job data, which is in the CSV. So you can choose any one of those three that you want. With Batch Geo, if you want to use another site too, like QGIS, and you're comfortable with that, that's great too. But I thought for this, we could just use Batch Geo for 100 columns. So I'll take you through how to do that right now, and then you can try it on your side and see how it goes.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if you demo it.
Yeah, okay, sure. Let me do screen share. Actually, just desktop share. Does it work? Yep. Okay, so I'm going to take the Australian web data, download it, open it. It's loading. So this was all the data that we scraped. We used a web scraper to scrape this data. And this also uses longitude and latitude here for some of it. But it also uses city and country as well. So this column is the geocode column. And this was the attack vector that we documented. And this was a website that it came from. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy 100 lines of this. I think it's about 100. Yeah. Copy it. I'm going to go to batch geo. And I'm going to paste it in. And then I'm going to go to set options. And what I want to do is for the zip postal country, I want to align that with the geocode column. So I'm going to align it with the geocode here. And you can then sort of like, you can change the way that this looks. So for example, you can change what the title of the data point will be on the map. And so I'll make it the site. So that it becomes the site, the university website there. And down here, you can change the map style. So let's say I want to do this blue water background one right here. And I can also change the columns in terms of like the density as well. So this is now geocoding everything really, really quickly and then formulating it here. Some of these records were not geocoded, so I have to go back and check about why. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the map. Let's call it Australia. You can do a description, you can do unlisted, you can do public. This is just specific to batch geo. If you're doing another platform, it doesn't matter, but for that. But I'll save map and then it sends it to me as an email. And you can go back and then edit that map later. And now I have my geocoded data, at least for most of it, for some of it. I'm going to do the FFL data now too, to show you how that looks. And keep in mind too, at the bottom, you can still see the actual raw data on batch geo, which is nice. I make the data available on like all the sites that I use with the Google Sheet or a downloadable version that's separate from it. And I also will take screenshots of the data, of the visualization data itself in case batch geo is down or if Google Maps is down. Some maps are on Google Maps since it's being hosted on that site as well. So this is the Kentucky FFL data, Federal Firearms License data from January 23. Now this is a lot of data points. So I'm scrolling down here. And there in January 2023, there are about 1,600 people that have a license to sell a gun in Kentucky. So I can go to edit, select all, copy. Go to batch geo. Set options. Mail zip code. License name. We do license name. There's different like kinds of licensees that they can get. Make it this color map this time. And now this is with my subscription. It's geocoding about 1,600 data points right now really quickly. All of them geocoded successfully. And it turned it into a heat map for me really quick. You say map. And there you go. You got all the data there mapped. So this is where I live, right around here, Lexington. So in my neighborhood, in this area, approximately there's about 5 gun dealers within a 4-mile range, a 5-kilometer range. These are private people that are just selling guns out of their home. And so this is an example of public data, like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms puts this data out every single month. And so this is one of those examples where we have these common class projects, for example, like you could do this for in Michigan or states where there's legal marijuana dispensaries would be one of those examples to map out. It's also published as an open source CSV file or Excel file by municipalities, by the state. And that's an example of, you have these dispensaries that are selling marijuana all throughout cities now. And there's a lot of them. And they open very quickly, and it's like there's more marijuana dispensaries than there are like restaurants. So having students map those at large scale is really interesting in terms of having conversations about public space, what's happening to cities, how they're being transformed, what kinds of businesses are opening.
Jim?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about preparing the data,
Yeah.
the Excel sheets? I just had a meeting, like a Zoom session, Zoom lecture a few hours ago, and we talked about refining the data, the database before visualization and everything.
Yeah.
If you share, if you so if you share the sheet like public, and if each person, everybody can just put their information like in a new row, how do you make sure that they do it the right way, like coordinates or what, zip code or whatever?
So I'll usually make a Google form and specify the parameters, and the back end of the form will be a CSV file. So I do that for a lot of stuff. For RepMap, for example, for job listings, they have to provide city or zip code. And so then that automatically creates a geocodable column. And I'll go and check it and stuff like that to make sure that it's compliant. But if it doesn't geocode, then I'll go back and fix it. And most of the time, the data that I get that's user generated is usable data. It's usually when I'm scraping data where we have to go back and like fix stuff. So for example, all the different like cheating websites that we scraped and did that project on, we had to do a lot of cleanup on the data. And so the three of us took turns just kind of cleaning up the data and making sure that the geocodable column was compliant, that the longitude and latitude, if we did conversions, was correct. So there's a human element there. Yeah.
Yes.
But in general, like in terms of, recording data on a weekly basis, like I spend about 20 to 30 minutes a week recording job data for our field. And I've been doing that now for 13 years. And so I really try, and people have asked me to record a lot more data. And I just, I say, look, I can only do so much well. And so, I'll add something every now and again that will require a very small amount of additional work. But in general, I want to kind of keep the process going, at a certain quality level. So it's manageable for me. Thank
you. I have another question. You showed us a lot of examples that are synchronous, actually, like our days, and that people can aggregate and put more and more information because it's something that's changing all the time, like on the daily basis and everything. But what about like the Samaritan example, when you want layers of chronological changes about like history, locations and everything? Do you have any tip or suggestion how to make it visualize all the layers?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're using like geocodable data, for example, you can put dates on the data and it will organize it by date. So, for example, so for RepMap, for example, the bottom column is organized by date. So, for example, if I just want to go, this is for this year's data. If I want to go and just view the data from September 9th, 2023 to the 12th, then I can limit it to that. So it makes it a bit more, that's one of the benefits of it being interactive as a geocodable map, is you can do those quick transformations where you can limit it. It's not so useful for like larger historical data, I think, that's going across many years and stuff like that. You could do it that way. Like I could change the column where this would be like the 19th century, for example. And then I could have 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st century and stuff if you wanted to do it that way. I haven't done it with that, but you could do it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And if you want to add more layers, like employers and businesses in the same map, you can add it also?
You can add any column you want. Yeah. So for example, if you wanted to create a column, just going to the job, I'll click over to the job spreadsheet, for example, here. So like this is college, university, the position, the geocode, the location, the link to the job ad, tenure track, non-tenure track, date added, and then notes. So I can add all kinds of notes there, descriptors and stuff like that about what the position is, if I wanted to. But you could change, you could add an employer column, you could add any column you want. It's just the more columns you add, if you're expanding the data over a long period of time, the more complicated the task becomes to sort of like, make sure that data, adheres to the criteria that you set out to comply with.
So where do you define the layers? At the
top the actual columns, yeah, A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
No, not at the Excel sheet, at the tool that you presented.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
the batch geo. Yeah.
Yes. Can you explain a little bit about the fields in the tool?
Yeah. So let me just geocode the job data and show you. Great question. So I'm going to set options. I'm going to do the geocode for geocode. And then I can make the title, for example, you want to make the title, for example, the employer. Let's make a college and university, that column. Okay. And encode it that way. And then when I click on one of the data sheets, then University of Oregon becomes the main header for that data. So everything else is there. Everything else that you see in that row of data, the location, Eugene, Oregon, the position title, assistant professor of English, digital rhetoric, the link, tenure track, non-tenure track, it's there, and the date added. All that data is there, but you can change the organizing title of it and then the arrangement of it by changing those columns there in the option for set map options. So you can add as many columns as you want. You could have like a giant finding aid, for example, of data that you then arrange and organize and stuff like that.
Okay, so repeating my questions, as soon as you have a date attached to a row, then you can specify the range of dates and color it in a specific color, and then you see range of periods of time.
Yes. Yep.
I see.
Yeah. So I've done like a combined, I've taken all the job map data, for example, for like 12 years and done like one giant map of all the data. And then, you can organize it by year if you want then as the main organizing, chronological time frame. Yeah, Odette asks, yeah, so that would add another layer to the column. It wouldn't add a layer to the map necessarily. It would add another layer to the columns in the spreadsheet, and then the actual data point, the map point, it would add a column there if you add another column. If that answers your question, I think. Other questions? Okay, yeah, yep. Yes.
Gilad?
Gilad.
Hi, so thank you very much, first of all. Thank you, Jim. Yeah. I was wondering whether it's possible also to check relations between entities in the map, like to connect dots, for example, I don't know, giving certain data in which maybe someone moved to a different place and you want to, or maybe someone transfers a commodity to a different place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So some of the options you can do, at least on Batch Geo, are you can enable clustering. So, like you saw that with the Canada map, where there was a lot of clustering of data in particular locations. And you can calculate the distance between dots on a map here, for example. So I'll enable that just so you can see what that looks like. And you can turn on the heat map. So I'll do both those things, make map. And so then it transforms the map into a heat map, and then also you can do data, zoom into that. So there's a couple different transformations you can do with the data just right there. If you want like a more complicated, if you want more options, like ArcGIS would be the place to go that Oded is mentioning as a platform that allows you to do a lot more stuff with maps. But if you want to do like heat map, clustering, noting distance between locations, like you can do all that on here. And certainly for students, this is a lot of really good options there in terms of that. If they're not mapping more than 100 points, then this is free for them to use.
Questions? So regarding teaching, you teach like graduate, undergraduate students, both.
Yeah, and so I've had a lot of graduate students do projects on RepMap, where they'll take the data and do different projects, like doing a deep dive into the data for trends in the job market over the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. So, for example, if I have a student that's interested in a particular area of work, they'll oftentimes go in the graduate seminar and look at the data in terms of that particular area and see where it's occurred over the last 5 or 6 years, and do a short report on it. For undergraduates, it's like a lot of like mostly mapping community resources. So, for example, I had a student we have a mining program at UK, an undergraduate mining program, because we have a lot of mines. We have a lot of abandoned mines. We have a lot of active mines. And so there is a ton of work done mapping mines. And most of that data is published as CSV files, open source, whether it's coal, limestone, you name it. We've got lots and lots of caves and mines. So that's one that I've had as a project recently, where a student has mapped all these different limestone mines that were structurally unstable, meaning don't go in them. And one of them I had gone into, so that was good to know.
That there was already an initiation to map atrocities locations. And if someone is faster than me, can you share with Jim the map, the October 7 map?
I've seen it. Yeah.
You've seen.
Yeah, it's really important. Yeah, I mean, a lot of community, a lot of like immediate disaster response stuff involves kind of like rapidly creating, geocodable maps. So, like you mentioned, user produced data and making sure that it's cohesive and checked and stuff like that. And in disaster situation, using an open spreadsheet to rapidly gather a lot of data, these kinds of transformations are really useful. And you can quickly take that data and geocode it for Publix. Yeah,
Definitely. The thing is that when you share, and what I said before, that sometimes you have to work on cleaning the data. A lot of work is just preparing the data to be. What about duplicates? If did you work like students are putting their data? Are they paying attention if there are duplicates or anything like that?
Usually you can filter that out, do like actual duplication of location and stuff like that. You can do things, for example, like if it's actually not a duplication, but it's a data point that uses the same city for the geocode, then you have two choices. You can either make that into a heat map and make that data point bigger because there's a second point for it. So for example, say there's like a lot of universities in New York. There's a lot of jobs in New York. You're going to have a lot of overlapping data points unless you do a heat map. So that's one example. You could do heat map to visualize it. Or you could add an additional piece of data to the city, like a street name, for example. So then you have another data point that separates out from that data point. Yeah, and then it'll appear on the map as a separate data point, as opposed to like two data points in the same spot that are then one after another sequential. So that would kind of go along with like the cleaning aspects. It doesn't impact the geocoding process, but it impacts the sort of use of the map, the usability of the map. So really good question.
People are before closing the session, I just wanted to tell you all that we have an email if you want to join our distribution list, and also that our next talk or next it will be like not a workshop but a talk, will be on December 18, and if you join our distribution list, then we will send you the you also have here the registration and information form. Jim, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great opportunity to learn